What
And I'm
about
like, it's
pregnancy?
fine.
Was that a breeze for you?
No, because I wasn't, I didn't have hyperemesis or hyperemetic, whatever it is. But the first 20 weeks or 6 to 20, like the day I turned 6 weeks pregnant, I started vomiting and I pretty much didn't stop till 20 weeks.
Oh
And it was weird.
God.
It was like a night sickness, afternoon and nighttime. So I started realizing, so I never really lost weight. Like it can be really dangerous for women who have hyperemesis and they're hospitalized or even potentially feeding tube kind of situation because they're constantly vomiting. But mine started at 3 p.m. every day. So I'd have a huge breakfast and a huge lunch to get calories in my body. And then it would start and then I couldn't even keep water down. So that sucked.
That's miserable.
And I would also pee myself. It was so violent. The retching, the
You peed
vomiting,
yourself.
I would pee myself, and I didn't want David. And the sound of it, I have like PTSD from the sound was so wretched. And I would have a towel around the toilet bowl, and David would just kind of hand me a dry thing of underwear because it happened. It was just this, but my whole stomach was contracting.
A shock to the system.
Yeah, it was awful, and I'd probably throw up 8 times until I went to bed. And then it stopped and it was a breeze. Now, labor, and I don't recommend this. I was
recommend
stupid.
labor?
No. I don't recommend. I was dumb and I had lunch with a friend who's much bigger than I am. She's, bigger boned, much more athletic, a lot taller. And not lunch. I had dinner with her maybe 3 or 4 weeks before I went into labor. And she had a baby, a year prior. And she was like, you can do this. Don't get the epidural. Women have been doing this for thousands of years without drugs.
You almost sounded like Jennifer Coolidge for a second. You can do this. Everything's great. People have been doing it.
And I had a plan. And the plan was get the epidural and then go for a natural birth. There were 2 things I was stupid. And again, I wasn't gaining a ton of weight. I was gaining weight. But anyway, so my friend's like, don't get the epidural. I'm like, changing my birth plan, not doing that. The other thing was at around 32 weeks pregnant, I'd only gained
4, 8, 12, 16, 24, 28.
Basically,
so 8 months.
Yeah.
A little over 8 months. Almost due.
Yeah, basically your pregnancy lasts 40 weeks, which doesn't make sense when you think of a pregnancy as being 9 months long.
Right.
But it's 40 weeks. So at 30 or 32 weeks, I had some issues with my placenta. And I had been in the ER overnight. And I had been like heavily bleeding. And David was in Vancouver. And they tried to have me C-section. And I was like, no. Because I'm reading that chart and I'm in distress right now, but my baby's not. So if the baby starts going into distress, we can have a conversation about it, C-section. But
wow.
I'm like, no.
So bring it on.
There were 5 all-female, weirdly, doctors who came in and were trying to convince me to C-section because I had giant clots of blood coming out. And
you said no.
I said no. I'm like, I can't get a hold of my husband right now. So the next day, obviously, he put the thing on where it's like, if I ring more than twice, the phone will ring. He was in Vancouver. But more than that, I'm like, I can see the monitor and I can see my baby's line and I can see my line and the baby's perfectly healthy right now. So I'm not going to
But they were worried about you.
They were kind of saying, it's probably healthier for you and the baby. And I'm like, I'll be good, probably.
Most likely.
But yeah. I was watching and so I didn't. And sure enough, I went into labor 2 days before her due date.
Wow.
And I was so happy that I didn't C-section early. But so around then I hadn't gained a ton of weight. And so I go to this placenta specialist, right? And I'm panicking because you do these weigh-ins. And I'm 30 or 32 weeks pregnant and I only gained 14 pounds. And I was kind of freaking out. And I remember I started crying. And most of these ultrasounds and stuff, I would FaceTime David because he was filming season 1 of A Million Little Things. And I just went alone or I would do a video, whatever. So he was there for that one. And I'm crying and I'm like, oh my God, my baby's going to be emaciated. And I was like a 6-pound baby. So I'm thinking, so we go into the room and this guy who's a doctor, who has been to medical school, who knows what he's doing, looks at me, looks at the ultrasound, looks back at me, and he goes, you should schedule a C-section right now. And I'm like, come on. I've only gained 14 pounds. There's no way. And he goes, your baby, I'm looking at you. You're extremely petite. Your baby is enormous. He said, you know, she was like 5.5 pounds, right? At 32 weeks. And I'm like, doctor, you know, it was a little arrogant and quite frankly, more stupid than anything. Doctor, the margin of error for these estimations of weight in utero is massive, right? So I'm just thinking there's no way. I've only gained 14 pounds. So I leave there thinking like, oh, is he kidding me? No. So anyway, so I'm going in with my birth plan. Now, no epidural, no C-section scheduled. I go into labor at 4 a.m. on a Saturday. I got into the bath, didn't wake David up till 7 because I was like, this is my last time alone with this little girl, right? So I got into the bath. I'm kind of talking to her at 7. I'm like, the contractions are getting worse. I didn't even have the doula come over until 4. I didn't even say, let's go to the hospital. By the time we got to the hospital at 8:30, I was 8 centimeters dilated, but I waited too long, also stupid. And so it took, 40 minutes to get to Cedars and it should have taken 20 because if David drove over a quarter, I was like, what the fuck? It was incredibly painful. We get there and they're like, so no epidural, right? I'm like, no. I'm in the shower. I'm on this ball. I'm screaming. I start vomiting. I started shaking so badly. I got whiplash, right? Vomiting everywhere. They're like, do you want the epidural? And I'm like, no, I can do this, right?
Christ.
Just dumbass. And then they come in and at some point they're like, yo, something has got to change because you've been in labor since 4 a.m. and the baby's only descended to a 1 and the 1, 2, and 3 is when they're crowning, right? And so they're like, we got to try something else. So they did like a dose of Pitocin or something, which is meant to induce labor. And that caused her to go into distress. So I don't know if the Pitocin was first, but at some point someone's like, we're going to give you a baby dose of it's called a walking epidural. And they did it and it was just too late because I'd gone too long without getting any epidural. And they come in and my OB, who's amazing, he goes, hey, Bits, so in all likelihood, because her head is just not descending and you've been in labor for, a long time at this point, in all likelihood, the placenta specialist is right and your baby's probably huge. And by this point also, I was 28 pounds. So I doubled. So I looked like I swallowed a basketball. So right. I had gained.
So this guy was not only right, but now the baby's even bigger.
Yeah. So
wow.
So the OB is kind of like, I think the specialist, I forgot his name. I probably blocked it out because I felt stupid. He's like, the specialist is probably right and your baby's probably huge. If you want to keep doing this, we can. This is around 7 a.m. So now this is 27 hours into this. God. And
27 hours of labor.
He's like, at this point, 85% chance we're gonna have to C-section, and it could be an emergency C-section. And at that point, I mean, if you see the photo of me right after I gave birth, there was no color in my face. It was, I have PTSD from the way I did it because it felt like, and again, this is why I recommend just get the epidural. Don't try to be tough. It felt like I was being drawn and quartered in medieval era, or honestly, that someone was taking my body and ripping it in half. That's what it felt like. I was vomiting from the sheer pain. Cut to, they finally C-section her, which I could have just gone in, had a C-section, stay in the hospital for 4 days. They give you warm chocolate chip cookies. It's great. But no, I ended up having 27 hours later, my daughter was 8.5 pounds and 22 inches long.
I was 8.5 pounds.
Yeah.